Well, welcome everybody here to Collector's Maze. I'm William Holmes, and I have the honor to be interviewing Ellen Dubin. It is a wonderful um, to have you here tonight and just kind of go over and talk about your career. I mean, it's kind of it's really expanded over from stage, screen, voice acting, a ton of different roles in a lot of different genres. And it's such a pleasure to talk to you this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to seeing where we jump around and find out what I have done in the past.
I will warn you, I am the king of tangents. So this is, I
Great.
think we're going to go just fine. I may have been known as the ADHD poster child. This is all good.
I mean, look at us, everybody. We picked the same background without even knowing each other. So
I know we didn't even send a memo out. You to think that we would have coordinated, you know, but we didn't, and we had the same ideas in mind.
Right.
So I want to kind of touch on sort of like the beginnings of your career, and then I want to start in the beginning because I want to focus a lot in the recent time more on the voice acting. But I mean, what got you involved in acting in general and coming into perform? Because it's a calling. I think of the people that get involved in this, it very much is a calling. How did this all come to fruition?
For most actors that I know, it was a calling. For me, I had no desire to be an actor. I wanted to be a ballet dancer. And I went into ballet. How did I start my acting career or my career in entertainment? Flat feet and being shy. My parents saw that I was very shy. Believe it or not, I'm making up for lost time. And I had flat feet. And the doctor said, tell her to do some dance, to help strengthen her feet and just give her more confidence. So it was a combo platter of being more confident in dealing with other kids and, improving my feet and my posture. And so, long story short, in ballet, at the end of each season, there would be a ballet recital on stage. And this shy little girl, I came to life. So hearing the audience respond to what I was doing, whether it was a dramatic ballet where I was, doing my swan arms, and I would always do an extra arm. Like if it was 10, I'd have to do 11 or 12. And then if it was a comedy ballet, I had this natural instinct to not do the next step. I waited for the audience to finish their laugh. And so my ballet teacher at the end of this couple of years, she said, you're never going to be a dancer. You're not, you just don't have technique, but you're going to be a great actress. And I cried and I cried and I cried at that time because I didn't care about acting. I just wanted to do ballet. Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward, her words ring, there's always mentors in people's lives. Mm-hmm. She was one of my mentors, one of the meanest but inspirational mentors I've ever had. May you rest in peace. I might be down, I'm not sure. And I still hear those words, but at the time, when you have a dream to do one thing, mm-hmm. and it goes a different road, it's not what you wanted at the time. But now when I look back, it was all better because I kept getting injuries. My body just couldn't. It's so athletic, ballet. You really
it is
an athlete. And no, I couldn't. The stamina wouldn't work for me. So basically, I started my career because of flat feet and lack of confidence. That's the truth. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, that's fascinating. So you got propelled in this. This is hopefully building confidence, though, in some ways.
Yep.
So what was the first from you're coming in as a ballerina doing this, and then how did you transition to the stage in this thing? And out one stage for another, in a sense.
That's a very good question. It was a monumental event. Actually, everything involving ballet was a monumental change in my life. I had a very bad injury. I did a major audition for a New York City ballet company, which was my dream to get into. And in the middle of the audition, for your listeners and viewers, a plie is a knee bend. It's one of the most basic steps you do in ballet. And I did a knee bend and my knees collapsed. And I literally in front of, this is now I can talk about it and sort of
Mhm.
be okay, but it was actually the biggest turning point in my career. And there's a panel, like you see this in the movies where the girl falls down. I literally, so, somebody, all I remember, it was sort of a blur is somebody helped me up. And I think I went to the
Mhm.
hospital, and that was the end of my career in ballet dancing. And so
Wow.
what ended up happening is I went to college and
Hmm.
studied a bunch of different things: English literature, Greek mythology, French. And one of the classes you had to take was a Shakespeare, like different plays and
Hmm.
different. And I went, okay, I'll take it. And you had to do a performance class as part of it. And I went, okay, this is interesting. So in school, in college, I started to have to do school plays,
Hmm.
all kinds, from the most ridiculous thing where you're like writhing under a blanket and you're like thinking about ghosts and like weird avant-garde plays to, Chekhov and Shakespeare and whatever. So I ran a gamut of plays. And during one of the years, there was a notice up on a bulletin board to do a show in a dinner theater called The Drunkard. Now, if you look up The Drunkard, you're going to die of laughter. Who wrote it? Barry Manilow. Barry,
What?
I mean, it's so funny. Barry Manilow wrote this musical melodrama. It's very bizarre. So for
Mhm.
$50 a week, I think it was, I booked that show, and I started to, this was my first
Mhm.
paying job as a stage actor. And I started to do musicals because I had dance background. So the ballet really helped. And I started to take musical theater and tap and jazz and contemporary and just did all kinds of dancing. And then I thought, I always knew one thing that ballet taught me was the discipline to strive for more. So I knew that if I wanted to be a stage actor in musicals, I would have to take singing. I have to take,
Mhm.
and I learned in a show very early on, when I had to cry every night, I couldn't get it up every night. I didn't know how to do it. I just relied on
Mhm.
sheer whatever. So I started taking acting classes, and then I started doing musicals all over Canada and the US and touring. But then that also took its toll because, girls are generally dancing in high heels or,
Mhm.
jumping up and down. And when you're younger, if the director says jump from the cement ceiling down to the floor and crawl
You're
under,
doing it.
yeah, or go on a trapeze, and I would just, I was always very eager, and I never wanted anybody to go, she won't do it, and I actually would overdo, which is mostly a lot of us who want to be, perfect in whatever perfect means. So I did a lot of theater and started to do more straight theater, i.e., not so much musical and dancing and stuff like that. And I was also not good at keeping up in a chorus, meaning doing the same thing as everybody else. I just was not a quick learner, but I always stood out,
Mhm.
not only because I'm 5'10", but also because I couldn't be the same. So we
Mhm.
started getting bigger parts in musicals and bigger parts in stage plays, and I really love the theater because it gives you the immediate reaction of the audience. You know when it's a clunker,
Mhm.
or when it's you can hear like the din, and you can feel their breath, which is my favorite genre in that I can get the reaction right away. In
Mhm.
television film, you can get the reaction of the crew or the director, but you don't know what an audience is going to do, and you don't know that you're not in control as much of the final product, because on stage it's you, the stage manager, the director's already gone, the props person's already gone. You're up there. Whatever happens live happens live. If the set falls down, which it has many times, you don't make an entrance, or somebody you're waiting for. And John, how are you? And John will be here in a minute. And John is coming. And let me make a phone call and see where John is. John, are you here? It's so you have to, punt a lot and
Mhm.
improvise. But in film and television, if something happens, generally you can stop and redo it.
Mhm.
So stage teaches you, and I think this helped my career from, going from ballet to stage to film to television to voiceover, teaches you how to tap into your emotions, I think, the best, because you have to have great technique to pull off 8 shows a week and not stop and start like you can in film and
Mhm.
television. And it's a different mindset. It's like you're a marathon runner each night,
Mhm.
each night. And I think that's the biggest difference in some of the other genres I've done. Not that you don't have to be a marathon runner doing a video game or an animated series, but
Mhm.
you can always retake if you screw up a line or something.
No, absolutely. You have a lot bit more flexibility there. I
Yeah.
mean, there's definitely no retakes in live performance. It's you have to go with it. And I do. It's one of the things I do is kind of funny. We do like I'm part of a group that does like live lightsaber choreography and theater. We tell like
Oh,
stories and do that. It was really fun. But it's like if something goes wrong, that's the first rule of thumb. It's like you gotta play, you just gotta keep moving, and go with it and go with the flow. That man, not exactly how we intended it to roll that.
show must go on, right?
It is absolutely it, and it's like it's such a minor thing, but I couldn't imagine doing like the intensity of doing like a show night after night after night, and you have to come in with that intensity each time because you got a new audience. You can't like you can't like sell the next size. The first time you're kind of going with the energy. Oh, this is a new experience. 20 shows in, you're kind of like muscle memory.
That's
So you
the
got to
int-
be careful.
for sure. Like when you're on your 100th show, it's actually in a way you have to pay even more attention because you can end
Mhm.
up being on automatic pilot and the audience can feel it. And I've seen shows like that where I'll go to the first or second show and then I'll go see a friend and a year later. And that is a real challenge. And I admire that for somebody to keep that fresh. It's a
Mhm.
lot about listening. It really is because nobody should be the exact. Yes, if you have to get something out of the refrigerator downstage
Mhm.
right, or you have to pick something up left, you've got to do it. But there's never going to be the same every single night. It cannot be if it's organic and coming from your guts. It
Mhm.
just can't. Yes, there's certain things and certain lines. Listen, I'll never forget. I was just thinking about this while I was talking to you. I did a show, and the leading man opposite me jumped to the next act. He forgot 4 pages. And I went, we realized after we were looking at each other in panic, and somehow or other, and I still don't know how I did it. And it's easier in contemporary. In Shakespeare, it's very
Mhm.
hard because you have to stick to the script. So I think I
Yeah.
said something like, what did you just say? Was it about the farm and whatever? I just made it. And
Yes.
he said, yes, the farm. Yes, I meant to tell you that. And I jumped the gun. And then we just went back. And it was like, if I hadn't listened or if I was on automatic pilot, I would have just recited the line that was supposed to be there at that time. It's,
Yes. No.
it's a give and
A
take.
lot of work.
Yeah.
No, that it is that intensity, and it is. I think people forget how much live performance is, how much it takes a toll on people in doing that because if you do it on screen you can like it's cut do this you do a lot of little short you know filming even a lot maybe a long session a long day but you do like seeing different angles you're going to do all this stuff
Yeah.
it's a lot of short stuff maybe a long day but a lot of short things instead you got like to do that entire performance with a very short break in between the acts and you got to reset you got to change the set
Exactly. And
it's
intermission is usually short, and if you have to do some changes into the next act costume or a makeup change or be on the other side of the set if it's a huge stage, and a lot of people during the intermission, you're not fooling around having a good time. You shouldn't be.
no
I don't mean you shouldn't have a good time and have fun in a show, but a lot of times you're working during that break while the audience goes to the bathroom or gets a souvenir program or their Diet Coke or whatever. But it's an Olympic art. That's how I look at it. An Olympic art.
So kind of what would you say was the first big break that you had, like in your acting career? What was you've had literally like the experience of transitioning from ballerina to doing live stage performance and that and touring, which is amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, that itself, you've had like some people's dreams right there.
100%.
Really.
And I will probably always go back to the stage if I can. I would say for me in television, I would say a very wacky, wild sci-fi series called Lex, Lexx, put me on the map in the sci-fi world and in the fan-based kingdom world. I
Mm-hmm.
never known about fans, or I never thought about that. But when you start to get emails or letters, or your agent gets letters, and I love this character, and you're like, oh, it's a whole other different world in the stage world. Not that you can't have people come backstage and want your
Mm-hmm.
autograph, but the sci-fi fans, to me, are the greatest and most passionate. And I think that Lex put me on the map. I would say that I give a huge amount of credit to Paul Donovan, who cast me
Mm-hmm.
in that show, and I never forget where I come from. And he put me on the map there. And the irony is, December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, I'm going to be doing a Lex reunion.
Yes, is that at WinterCon?
Yeah, and he just, I don't know, we did it 5 years ago, and then he
Uh-huh.
again, because there's going to be a Farscape reunion, and we were before Farscape, even though I love
Mm-hmm.
Farscape, I know them all, but so it's going to be me and Xenia and Ava, who were the first two leading ladies,
Mm-hmm.
and then Michael McManus, who was Kai with the crazy black hairdo.
Yes, there.
Yeah, exactly.
I love the show, by the way. I remember watching it and like, and that's the thing of it is, and like I want to touch a little bit on Lex, and like I want to hear like your thoughts, because that was a time when like sci-fi was just really coming of age. There was a lot of movies, and you had some television, like Star Trek obviously pioneered science
Yeah,
fiction
sure.
and on the small screen. But there was not a lot going on television for science fiction. It was really, especially in the 80s and early 90s, there
Correct.
really wasn't much going on. You turn on TV, there's more dramas, there's sitcoms. This is the era of that, and part of that is just budgetary restrictions
Exactly.
that came into all of that. Let's face it. But I think when sci-fi, I remember watching the Sci-Fi Channel, and I was, and how old was I when that was coming out? It was for me like I was probably in my middle 20s, and I watched. There was Lex, Farscape,
Yeah.
the Invisible Man. I'm gonna date myself. There were
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And they this little like fair, it was like a Friday night. We had Friday night. Sci-Fi Channel had all original programming, which was unheard of.
I didn't know that. Wow. Interesting. Yeah.
And I remember watching that and then going, because Lex was very unique. It was not your normal science fiction. It was. I
Oh,
mean, it was. I mean, I don't know how I could explain the. It is such a far fetched principle. Bounty hunters. You had the sex appeal. You had
yes. Yeah.
you had like this whole thing, this whole concept, and flying around in a bug spaceship, and it was such a the creativity was off the map.
It's one of those shows, and some people will go, "Oh, I didn't like that show," and I go, "Well, what do you remember?" And they remember all the images, they remember the characters, and I go, "No matter what you feel about Lex, you will never forget it." Paul Donovan was a genius, and Lex
Oh, he
Gigaro,
was.
he, one of the creators. The show, like a child could look at it and go, "Oh, look at these funny people," but he had a lot of double entendres and made a lot of
Mm-hmm.
comments about history and religion and politics and
Mm-hmm.
spoofs of different musicals and different movies. Like the final show was Apocalypse Now.
Mm-hmm.
as we went to Thailand and did that show, and I will never forget it. And I was, I'm such a researcher, so I'm looking at Apocalypse
Hmm.
Now, and I'm going, okay, Apocalypse Now, and there's a Kurtz-like character, and and then there's the President of the United States, and all these twisted thoughts about religion. I mean, Paul's a genius. He is a
No, very much so. There was a lot of commentary in that show. I mean, there really was.
Exactly. It wasn't just a cute, fairy tale with crazy costumes and crazy looking people. And some people like that, but there
Yeah.
was a lot like for adults, and it was actually very cerebral. It was even
Mhm.
though it was wacky and esoteric and strange, it was you needed to kind of go, that's an interesting subject matter and how he handles it.
No,
So,
and I think that's one of the things that I think you can watch that show at two levels. There are the people that just watch it because, oh, it is kind of wacky and is cool, cool, it's kind of like this very cool designs, interesting characters and this. But you're right, it had a incredible cerebral level that, touched on so much in society, the ridiculousness of life at times.
oh, no, and I've been watching some of them again. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I'm like, wow, this was really ahead of its time in a kind
Oh,
of
it
way.
was.
And it was just the sad part was, I mean, we're getting new fans again, but it was just before social media. Farscape
Mhm.
was just a little bit later, and they still didn't have a lot of social media, but they still had more press. We at the time it was on, I think, Showtime Network, and we had great leading men like Rutger Hauer and Tim Curry and Malcolm McDowell and
Mhm.
Barry Bostwick.
I mean, you had some great people you worked. As I was going to go to that, is like, how was it to work with? I mean, you've just named three of the great names of acting. Rutger Hauer, Tim Curry. One of the most iconic actors that
And Barry Bostwick and
and
Malcolm McDowell. I mean,
now.
come on.
I mean, yeah. I mean, seriously, you've got people in there that are just iconic in this show, and you're like going, "Wow!" That had to be amazing just to interact with all these great actors that are
Mind
involved in
blowing. Bill, it was mind blowing. I could not believe. I mean, I worked with Tim and I worked with Barry. I did not work with Rutger, but I happened to hang around to meet him because oh yeah, and he's an amazing actor. May he rest in peace. And Malcolm McDowell, I did not meet, but man, I wanted to meet him. But Barry is the one I worked with most, and I kept
it.
going. Let's do the time.
Well,
I didn't out loud, but And then I saw him at a sci-fi convention maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I went up to him and I said, "Do you remember me?" And I showed him a picture, and he goes, "Fans are asking me where I can get those pictures." And his manager was there, and I sent them a whole bunch of pictures of me and Barry. And so now, not only I said, "Really, they don't care so much about all your other work?" They said, "No, they keep asking about Lex." I said, "Okay." So
so
he is
oh,
phenomenal.
no, that's fascinating. So just tell us a little bit about your character on that show, because that character was very interesting.
It was actually, again, Paul was very ahead of its time because one good thing about sci-fi was is that women's characters were very different and more
Mhm.
interesting at the time. Now there's a lot more variety, very powerful.
Mhm.
My character, even though it was a comedic relief, I said whatever the hell people would like to say in real life. No holds barred, no censorship, mouth, just aggressive, ballsy person. And that was not that common for a female character at that time.
Mhm.
And I remember he kept saying, and I was coming off dance then, and he said, "I don't want you to be graceful with this." He said, "You're a very graceful, elegant woman, Ellen." So he said, "Just think of a cannibal woman and how she would walk and clump, clump, clump." So I used my dance to go the opposite of how I am. So if you notice when I'm walking, and I got these boots, I'm walking very aggressively.
Mhm.
So the dance background helped me do Jiggerata.
Mhm.
Most unique thing about Jiggerado was the fan base was so big that he kept, even if my character died, he would bring me back and reincarnate me into another character. So I went from Jiggerado to Queen to a crazy real estate agent to the Pope, the first, so far, I think the only female Pope in sci-fi history, but I don't watch every sci-fi show. So because but the same characteristics. So she was still aggressive, wild, taking people hostage and acting like a crazy woman and enjoying toying with Stanley Tweedle, the male lead played by the
Oh
one
yes.
Downey, who was such a great everyman with a capital E. Um,
Hmm.
so I just this character, and she was a cannibal. I was a cannibal. My costume was so gross when I saw it. It was the skin of a man that I had eviscerated. Lovely. And it had the head of the man on the back. So there was like a head. It
Yeah.
was very crude. It was very gross. And when I saw it, I went, well, and it was rubber latex. And the important thing
Hmm.
about the rubber latex thing is I had a scene where I had to come out of the water like an animal. I remember seeing this.
Yeah.
And the rubber latex stunk to high heavens.
Oh yes.
One person would eat lunch with me, and everybody was like, "Ugh." And if you notice in season, I think 2 or 3, a very astute fan said, fans are very blunt. Did you gain weight the first? Will you weigh more in the first season than the second season? I said, actually, I weighed less, but they bulked me up. And in the second season, they gave me a suede buckskin, sort of a tighter looking thing because the rubber latex literally crumbled and it went to the way of the Jiggerado graveyard.
But
So,
latex does not have a long-term longevity.
oh no, and it wouldn't. It wasn't malleable. So my knees were like we had to cut holes in there. If you notice, there's a lot of
Yeah.
holes and slits in the costume. But it was, looking back on that show, the greatest cast, one of the highlights of my career because we got to go to Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is beautiful,
Mhm.
Berlin, Germany, Potsdam, Germany, Thailand. I
Mhm.
mean, that's the time when they had budgets. So you to work and travel and meet different people of different cultures. It was amazing. I look back now and I go, I'm so grateful because when I initially got the audition, I didn't like sci-fi. I'm sorry, everybody, I didn't. Now I love sci-fi. It's one of the genres that I want to continue to do, and the stories are endless. So grateful to Jiggerada the Wicked. Queen was that. Did you see that part when I'm this wacky queen and I don't
Mhm.
have a body? And then the Pope's religion was, sorry, Catholics, practicing Catholics, golf. Golf. And
Mhm.
that was a comment by Paul Donovan about how people are so religious about their golf games, and that was the new Catholicism. It's very irreverent. It's very irreverent. I'll put it that way. And I know that he had some complaints about it, but that was the point.
But
Whatever.
I think that show really did. I mean, it poked in areas that and I think that was a time when it was a very transitionary period. We had like some really great, like cinema, like my God, like Mel Brooks and
Oh, yeah.
Norman Lear, and poking all of the ridiculous nature of society and stereotypes and everything else.
Different time.
And but it was always real world stuff that
Yeah.
did that. It was like it's somebody's house, the neighborhood or at the bar or wherever. All these great stories, that are or was historical. These great shows, historical periods. But fantasy was like it really hadn't done that yet. It was always epic. It's just these epic adventures. Even Star Wars, the epic adventure and saga, and or like the wagon train in space with Star Trek. But here you had this. It was some metaphor, but this kind of hit more on like real world society
Yes.
rather than critique of a made up civilization.
100%, 100%. And I think that's what the audience also appreciated. It's a
Mhm.
good point you raise. Yeah. Oh,
No,
he's
definitely great stuff. And like, okay, now I gotta say, so you have several cult classics, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word for that,
the
but
right word.
we've talked about Lex, and then you were in Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, this is like, you know, the amount of kids. It's like I work with young adults now, and I laugh about it. Even the amount of kids that know the term nunchucking skills.
Yes. Yes, I know. Well, it became the vernacular of a generation, and it's still going on. I mean, I have people who come up to me and they quote the whole movie, and they have their, the tater tots and sweet, and
Mhm.
all these different expressions, and it's who would have thunk it? And
I know.
Napoleon Dynamite came about because of Lex.
Yes. Oh, really?
I'll tell you
Oh
how
my
that
God!
happened.
I did not know that. I had no idea of that.
Christopher Wyatt, or Chris Wyatt, was one of the producers of Napoleon Dynamite. And here's a lesson, kids. If you want to get into acting, always do a good job because you never know where your next job is going to come from. Always put your heart and soul in it. That's my message for you today. Anyway, there's one thing you can take away. So he was interviewing actors for a magazine called Cinescape. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I actually have.
Yeah, Cinescape was a big sci-fi magazine. So he was talking about Jiggerada and my career in Lex. He interviews me. We do the interview. We have a great time. It was in writing interview, old fashioned, with pictures, beautiful spread. It was a
Mhm.
great magazine. Flash forward, I don't remember how many years later, and he says, I'm producing a movie called Napoleon Dynamite. And I remember how much fun we had doing the Lex interview, and I
Mhm.
thought for a part. I said, oh, okay. He said, I'm going to send you a script. I was in LA at the time, and he sent me a script, and I went, what the heck is this? What is this nonsense with a llama on this? What well, nobody's offering me a part. I've never been to Idaho. I'll go to Idaho. And so I said, okay, is this it? He goes, yeah, this is it. I went, okay, sounds like fun. So from Lex, the interview to Napoleon Dynamite, and I go to Preston, Idaho, and I do this crazy movie. And I open the door as Aunt Eileen in my first scene. I'd never seen John Heater before because he did not
Mhm.
hang out on the set. He opens the door. I open the door with Uncle Rico in the back, the
Mhm.
fantastic John
I
Grease.
am. Yeah.
His White Lotus performance opposite Jennifer Coolidge is amazing, but I digress. But I love him. And I see this guy with the hair and the teeth and that face and his body language. And
Mhm.
if you know me, I literally bit my inside of my mouth so I would not laugh so hard because that entrance was so brilliant. With Tricia home. And I went, if you know me, there's a pause before I say my line because I'm literally, it's my first day on the set and I don't want to
Mhm.
screw up and laugh right away. And I go, no.
Mhm.
It was so in character and so funny. Oh, what a brilliant performance. And, I got to tell you, somebody asked me the other day, did you think it would be that big? And I went, no, no. I had a great time. I always have a good time, whatever I do, but it became the comedy of a generation. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be part of something like that. It's part of history. It's cult.
It really is. It is. It is. It is something that really, did. It was a comedy of a generation. I have to totally agree with that. It's the amount, and it's like and it still carries on
Yes, it does,
to
which I
the
love.
younger people have from the parents that this is like it's like almost an initiation to watch this, that generation to their kids. And I think that's a really, that has to be quite a like a just a epic milestone, just to know that
It is
people
surprising.
how much impact.
It's uh it's a stunner for me and wonderfully shocking and wonderfully again, the fans, like for Lex and sci-fi, the fans, I mean, you do the work for yourself, but truly you really respect and enjoy what the audience brings to your table by having a reaction to your work. And that to me is so heartwarming. It's
Mhm.
amazing. Yeah.
And it's kind of like, that's got to be kind of a thing that you put into it because that rapport, even if, in stage, you get that direct rapport, like you said, with the audience, you get that immediate feedback. But is it kind of a delayed thing in screen? Like you've had the experience where, like you said, someone goes, if you hit it home, you knew the audience was there.
Yeah.
Here, you have to kind of wait. You're like, okay, you're watching even when you watch the final product, you watch the final cut, you're still like, no one's seen it other than a handful of people,
No, no,
and
no.
everybody's invested in it. So yeah, it's genius. Everybody's going, that's great.
I remember reading after the screening at Sundance how there was a standing ovation and then it got bought really quickly.
Mhm.
I went, oh, this was bought right away. Like, cause there's a whole rush I've never been to Sundance, but I remember reading about this and it won the audience award. It won a bunch of awards. And I went, oh, okay. And then the train started chugging. And then fans started writing our agents. And no matter, even if you weren't, John or John Heater or John Grease or Ephraim Ramirez who played Pedro, and it keeps going. I got to tell you, and there's been a lot of anniversaries, and now they're doing tours of the movie in various small towns in the U.S. and
Mhm.
Canada, all over the place. Um, it's the momentum is going. We're still getting fans, and I would say once or twice a week, I'm still getting a note about it, which is really
That's
amazing.
awesome.
It's got great staying power. Listen, Bill, if you can't admit that everybody is a nerd, that you're a nerd, then you got a problem.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're not a nerd, I think nerds are very attractive and very interesting and compelling people. And I think everyone, and I think that's the appeal of the movie. Now that I'm
Mhm.
talking, we all have, I mean, the characters are very different and you go on their journey with them, but we all have an inner nerd. We all have
Mhm.
something quirky about us that people either go, what? But it's all this. And I always tell this because I teach video game acting. I'll say anything that your teacher said don't do is what you should do. That makes you special. It makes you different. Anything that people are like, oh no, or you always hear about comedians that do voices in school, or Jim
Mhm.
Carrey's Robin Williams of the world, and you're like, all that stuff that makes you quirky or different or wacky or nerdy is what makes
Mhm.
it special. And I think that movie appeals to people on that level for sure. For me.
No, I think you're right because I think, we're, especially young people,
Yeah.
they have got so much pressure to be, conform, you know,
100%. We've
you
all
know,
in our
it's like, and, I remember, and it's funny because I'm very much an extrovert now and outgoing. But when I was younger, I remember like wanting to be the kid in the corner that didn't talk, didn't do anything. It's like,
yeah, yeah.
when it just left alone. And it's like you're going there at that age, and you're like, please don't look at me, please. I want to be just like everybody else.
Yes, 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 for sure. And I always tell people, don't be like everybody else, be yourself. But it's hard because you want to
It
conform, but
is. It
you don't
is.
want
And
people
I
looking. I get it.
and I think that was the best thing of my life is probably right about freshman or sophomore year of high school. I kind of go like, why am I worried about this again? And just and I started being myself and just like saying what I thought, instead of trying to figure out what I should say. What is the right thing to say for me in the situation? And what would be the cool thing to say? And I go, oh, I'm just gonna say what I really think. And it was probably the most liberating thing of my life.
It truly is. It sets you free. It's hard to do though. We're all such
It
our own
is.
worst enemy, aren't we?
No, no, and I think it is because we all like, we all want to be accepted. We all want to be, even people, you want to be accepted, you want to be liked for the most part. The people that don't, you kind of really worry. It's like, it's like we used to joke with kids, like, did you play Skeletor as a kid? I didn't like it, they or whatever, the one that wants to be hated
Sadly,
or
I know what you're
feared,
talking
that's the
about.
guy you got to worry about. There's always one, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but but for the most part, people want to be liked or at least admired or in some way, you know, and it's like, and you're constantly trying to figure out how to get that. And
Sure.
I think the easiest part of it is sometimes stop worrying about it, and that becomes a natural. You're more freedom and how being what you really are. I think kind of gives you that goal rather than trying to conform. you know.
A lot of performers are very hard on themselves and very shy, and that's how I started out. And if you talk to a lot of actors, and some are still really shy, like they can't do an interview or they're not good in
Mhm.
public. But when they get on the stage or when they do their movie or their television series or a voiceover, they come to life. And that's very common, very common. It's the way to express themselves. They feel there's a little bit of even though you're supposed to use yourself in your
Mhm.
performance, I definitely believe that. A lot of people feel the comfort that they're a little bit masked. There's a little bit of hiding there, even though, again, like I said,
Mhm.
the best performers really truly reveal themselves.
It's funny. I have
Just a
on a much smaller scale, but it's kind of funny. One of my hobbies is building costumes, and I have friends that do the same thing. And it's like I would laugh when they would put on this really quiet, neat person, doesn't really say much, puts
yeah.
on this costume that is a monster or something villainous or whatever, and my their whole persona
They
changes.
come to life, right? It's like
They come to
it's just
life. They become animated. They're like, and they're
yeah,
interacting with people, and they're just loving it. And then they take it off, and
I know,
they
I
go
know.
back to the little quiet.
The freedom. It gives you permission sometimes
It
to
does.
have the costume, a little bit of the mask, to just let go. It's
Mm-hmm.
I get it because I had that on stage when I was playing a character, even though I was using myself. And as I became a better actor, I knew that I always had to go back to myself. It just frees you up. It does. You're not as uptight.
No, I totally get that. But and going on the acting front, and this is
Yeah.
one of the things, like you obviously you have awards and all this wonderful area that you have now moved into voice acting, both in animation and in video games. I mean, you got to play Captain Phasma, the voice.
That's the
Um,
best.
I know it's like and you have so many different whether it's an orc
Yeah.
in World of Warcraft, you've got all these
Hard.
wonderful characters.
Yeah.
They're great. Do you think that coming from the world of stage and screen helped your career that way and kind of move that when you went that direction, or did you draw on that in any way, or was it two different mediums and they didn't really intersect?
I think everything intersects. I mean, voice acting, and I tell this to my students and I tell this to people who are starting out, don't worry about your voice. It's about acting. The best voice actors, whether it's a commercial, a narration for Disney or a video game or an animation, promo, you must be a great actor. Because if you worry about the sound of your voice, or it's like if you're on camera and you worry about how you look and you're doing a scene, it's not going to work. You have to engage with the other actor, if you're on camera or on stage. And voiceovers, if you're not talking to another person, even if they're not there, because in video games you're by
Mhm.
yourself, for example, the acting isn't stellar The audience is going to hear when you're not connecting. But if you're just putting
Mhm.
on voices, hi, I'm a low voice. I'm a high voice. Nyeh, nyeh, nyeh. Not going to work. So what was the question? What was the question?
No, but just like how
Oh,
did you draw on the on
oh,
like your
okay, I got it.
previous career? And I mean, it's a similar career. That's why I was just say it's not like you're deviating, but I mean, it does change. A lot of times you're in a
It
little
is.
box. You're in this little
Every medium,
box.
exactly. Every medium changes, but you do rely on your training. Like I'm going to go with video games right now. For example, on stage, we're opposite another actor. In film and television, you're opposite another actor unless you're doing a monologue. There's a set, there's costumes, there's lighting, there's sound. In my little booth, when I'm either doing my audition or doing my job, sometimes because of COVID, we did a lot of our jobs at home. But
Mm.
if I'm in the studio, there's a director sometimes in the studio, and then there's sometimes on a phone call the studio, the creators like a Bethesda or whatever. If you're doing Sky,
Mhm.
excuse me, whatever game you're doing, and they'll give you input. But you don't have another actor to act opposite, so you don't even know. Like if I'm doing a character and another actor that I know is doing the other character, and he's in a studio in England or Los Angeles or New York, you don't know how they're going to react to your dialogue. So that's why you do 2 or 3 different versions just in case, and then they edit it in. I don't know how they do that. That's a whole other thing I admire. So technically, you have to be able to create where you are, who you're talking to, the relationship without an audience seeing you. And in a way, the voice actor has the most challenging of mediums. And I've done them all now, and I love them all. And I absolutely adore voiceovers. I love that challenge. But again, you're having a sword fight. You got to do the sword fight.
Do
It
you
should
actually do the sort of? I mean, my question is like when you're in that little box,
in the
are
booth,
you kind
you
of
are without
visualize?
making noise to, cause thrashing in
Yeah.
the you're miming and you're lunging and you're
Mhm.
out of breath because if you stand on like a pile of wood, the audience is going to hear where's the lunge,
Where's your breath?
where's the,
Yes.
fighting back or the falling on the floor. I come out of there like you talk about World of Warcraft, for example. I actually
Mhm.
pulled a muscle in World of Warcraft. Now I pulled my hamstring because I was lunging so much and it was
Yeah.
such a fierce, nasty, evil villainess. But I come out of there sweating. And voice actors, it's exhausting. It's like stage work, and that if you don't physicalize, it will not come out in the voice. Everybody
Mhm.
knows this. Here's your big lesson in voiceovers. If it doesn't come out in the physical, it will not come out in the voice. So if you're just standing there like a robot that's stiff, it won't work. If you're trying to reach out to your brother, reach out to your brother. If you're trying to serve a drink, serve the drink. If you're drinking a beer in a bar scene, they got to whatever
Mhm.
smaller. It's got to be so real. If you're eating, I eat.
Mhm.
You got to chew, you got to eat. So they can hear it. If you got to sneeze, you really got to do it. This, and they can't visualize it. They have to visualize it. They can't see it visually. So
Mhm.
that's the biggest difference. Plus, you can be in your pajamas and do hair and makeup, and I can play a 3-year-old. I can play a 300-year-old. I could play a lizard. I could play a mother. I could play a king. I could play a queen. I can play an AI. So I have more versatility as a voiceover actor than I do as an on-camera actor. You know, I'm not going to play 10 years old anymore. Maybe 11, but it's just the way it is. There's an
Mhm.
age range just visually before you open your mouth, or physically,
Absolutely.
if you're heavy or skinny or whatever you are, or pink, yellow, whatever. There's a certain, and it's getting better visually, but there's a certain thing with visual that's immediately the audience goes, oh, they are this. But with a voice, I mean, I play little kids. I played uh, a lot of very old people in their 80s, 90s. I played 5,000-year-olds. So I
Yeah.
love the versatility. I find it very freeing. I don't have to worry about how I look. I don't have to worry about what I'm wearing. It's all done through this lovely little voice box in this little kind of thing. And the microphone is basically like the ear of the other character.
Mhm.
So that, but I use everything because I'm a stage actor and I'm used to drawing up, getting emotional very quickly because of my technique. In video games and animation, especially video games, you don't get the material till you get in that studio. So
Yeah.
you cannot do, and people say to me, when am I going to be ready, Ellen, to do a video game? I said, I'll tell you when you're going to be ready. When you can go into a studio and do a full-fledged performance in one take. Not two, not three. You'll get one or two sometimes because they need to have different versions. They don't have time to teach you how to act. And you have to be a good cold reader. So doing stage, and I always tell actors, do some stage, even if it's community theater, or read out loud, because a lot of people are not good readers. They just aren't. They can't vocalize it. So you have to literally be able to, especially in fantasy pieces, if you do Shakespeare, it really helps. Forsooth, my brother cometh and go to the executioner, or whatever,
Yes.
whatever your line is, and then, I had to do a scene where I think my brother is at the guillotine. This was obviously a period piece. And, you have to cry. And then also, it's not in order. So I had to cry. And then the next scene, I'm a merry wench with a Cockney accent in England because I played like 80 characters in Skyrim. And you're like, oh, all right, here we go. And you're just, so you have to have the facility to do different accents. And this is something I tell people because in a room, they'll go, oh, by the way, can you do a Russian accent for this character that we're going to throw at you? And you hope you can. I always hope I don't get South African or Australian because they're my worst. And one time they went, maybe she should do Australian. I'm going, oh, please, please, no, no. And I have to, you know what? In your toolbox, the more you have and the more they throw at you, or could you make this character a 3-year-old and a very soft voice? And, you have to be technically ready, do a lot of reading, accent work, do a lot of studying, watching television shows. Like if you're going to do a post-apocalyptic zombie thing, you should have watched The Walking Dead. You should have watched the Game of Thrones for fantasy pieces. There's a lot of research out there right now. So I think everybody's background, like I teach people who are cops, I've taught people who are lawyers, all their stuff and summations or cops when they're arresting people, all that real life stuff is so prominent in video games right now that, like a Law and Order kind of read, the cinematic read is so important. So I'd say arrest me, give me an improv, and then I give them a cop or, some military person, which is huge in video games. And they transfer how they act in real life, especially if they're not an actor. And it's really fascinating to watch them do their own language. And then I say, okay, now go into the language of what the script is. So I believe that everybody can use anything in their life to help them, but acting training and improv, especially for animation, is very important. Does that answer your
No, I
question?
mean, yeah, it does. And in fact, it's fascinating. Like you said, like you have to switch characters on a dime. You're like, you have this, you have one read, maybe two, and then, you're moving on and going from different
100%
accents, different characters, the development. I mean, and
relationships.
then,
Remember, the player can
yeah,
pick different scenarios, right?
yeah. So you've got to make all these, and it's not just like where you're developing in times, and sometimes you do. You have one developed character you're going to follow through, but
Right.
if you're just going through and like you're doing maybe a character, and then you're also doing these other NPCs or whatever characters that are out there, like you said, you're going from a Cockney accent to maybe the American accent to a Russian accent, and you're trying to put all of these on, and you're going from a 3-year-old to a 100-year-old.
Usually
You must feel a little schizophrenic at times,
do.
it's gotta
You
feel
do.
that way.
Usually in a video game, you are told, but there's been times where they've thrown something. Hey, can you, especially if you're doing a lead, if you're doing a lead, very rarely, you may get one or two lines of another character, but they don't throw that at you. But if you're doing three main, like in Guild Wars 2, which was one of my first video games, I did Mighty Gricka, Torin, and I forget the third character. You did three main characters, and they're all slightly different. And they teach you, if it's interesting, if you're part of like a tribe or a certain character that's setting up a precedent as to how they talk, like all people who are Norns or orcs, there's a certain rasp or you have to add to it. So it's a consistency, like when everybody plays that character, it may not be the same sound, but it's so helpful when the creators are there and they go, okay, this one's very dry. She's a lizard, and there's no water. So and there's no, there's gills, and and so how would you breathe? How would you breathe if you had gills?
Yeah.
All this physicality and I find it fascinating. And if you get a picture, which is great, you don't always get a picture, and you don't always know up until maybe 6th or 7th session what game you're doing. Now there's some Screen Actors Guild rules where they have to let you know what some people don't want to do certain types of games that they don't agree with, let's say morally or whatever. So they're being more transparent now. But I love getting a picture because it really helps to see, oh, that character's 9 feet and it's got a tongue and it's got, 50 claws or whatever.
No, but it's so fascinating. It's like you've got like so much development with that.
It's great.
And like, and this is like, you have, I mean, like you just came off of winning the Vega Award, 23. 23 feels like it's over, but it's still here with us. I'm like, and listening to the trailer, a Weird Song, I was like,
amazing.
It is so eerie. It's like, and I go, number one, I wouldn't have known that was you doing that.
Yeah, I know.
And I listened to it and I'm like, this is so, it's set the state. I mean, it made me want to go buy the game.
Yeah.
Which is what it's supposed to do.
It's
no,
it's amazing. It's
no.
Gage Allen, who did the trailer with me and cast me, and it's my second time working with him. We didn't know where we were going to go with it, and I just the words, and I went, I'm going to try something here, and he went, oh, and he said, just creep us out. And I've been starting to do a lot of horror kind of voices lately. It's been interesting.
Yeah.
I never knew I could do the creep factor because, I play a lot of Kate Blanchett kind of characters, and then but you know what? It's a versatility. And again, I was like crawling and like really, I was all hunched over when I was doing the voice and doing this sort of weird kind of like the Witches of Macbeth kind of thing. That's how my image was. And it's been getting a lot of, I just got a Nixon NYX award for that and won a Muse award. That's been 3 wins for that particular trailer.
It was amazing. I mean, it literally, listening to that voice, I closed my eyes. I didn't even look at the trailer. I mean, first time I started watching the trailer. I'm like, I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see the visual.
Yeah, that's cool.
I wanted just to hear the voice. And it was, I mean, it just totally set this ominous, like, feeling of like, you could just feel the malevolence. And
that's a great word for it. A great word. No, I had a really good time doing that, and I hope that character comes back because that would be right up my alley at this point in time.
No, I just say that is definitely a very fascinating.
I think she was 1,000. I think he told me she was 1,000 and something years old. So there you go.
Well, you said you got some time potentially here. It's like we got to find out the expiration date.
Yeah, exactly. It's very funny.
No, but it's such a good overall just the sounds and everything. It's just
a good one. And he's brilliant. Gage Allen is a brilliant creator. and his trailers, I mean, I think he won 102 awards with all his trailers, and he creates, and he's a brilliant
Mhm.
man. I think he just turned 30 or something. So yeah,
I know. I know. And that's alone. He is really young. I mean, for the industry, and I'm like, wow, that is.
it's just
I
so imaginative.
so cool. And we're coming up on it. It's hard to believe we've been talking for about an
We have?
hour. I know. I know. It's like I know. This is why I love these things because you're so cool, and I'm always like I look down because because I don't want to stare at a clock because I feel like that's the worst. But it's like you have it there for you, and you're one of these people who go, I'm going to look at it, and I'm like, no, I always keep it down and look at it. Let's see what time was, and I'm like, we were like 30 minutes in or something, and it's like, oh, we were about an hour in, and I'm like, but I do have like a few more questions. I want to be respectful of your time, but what? And I know you've had so many characters. Is there one particular thing that really like if you go this is this is I feel this is part of me. I feel like this is my favorite, if you will. And I
Well,
know that's a hard one. That's a hard thing.
it's a hard one, and it's I've been very lucky to have a very versatile career. I've
You
always
do.
keeping. I always said I've been a leading lady with character and a character lady with leading. I'm kind of been able to, and I've never really wanted to be, pigeonholed. But I go back to Jiggerata because it put me on the map in the sci-fi world. I did a wonderful series, and I really hope it gets picked up by a streaming service. It was called The Collector. It was a television series
I
for
remember.
but a
Yeah.
man who collects souls for the devil, and I'm very proud of my work on that. As Jerry Slade, who was a reporter who was chasing this guy who she wondered what kind of association he had with the devil, and my son may have been the son of the devil. So I enjoyed working on The Collector, the supernatural drama. We won a lot of awards, and it was a great show, and I think that made me. That was my first series. I mean, I did Lex, and I did 4 seasons of it, but I was recurring. This one, I was a regular, so that taught me the grind of television and
Mhm.
how to. Again, that helped my voiceover career, doing television
Mhm.
fast on a lower budget and getting the results quickly and doing great performances. All that built up to the voice career where I could literally get a performance quickly and tap into my emotional stuff or the comedic stuff and get the laughs. So I would say that was important. And I have to go with 2 more recent ones. First of all, voiceover wise, to get Captain Phasma and to get a Star Wars, the most iconic franchise in the world. When I got that, I cried because it said SW and it said Lucas Arts on my script.
Yes.
George Lucas, are you kidding? Disney and George Lucas. And I just kept looking at it. And I just watched your interview with my friend Doug Stone, and he said he kept his first sticker when he went parking to a studio.
Yes.
And I was going to tell you the same thing. I still have my sticker when I went to the studio to do Captain Phasma first for Lego Star Wars because I
Oh
was
my
doing,
gosh, that's so cool.
and I had my Captain Phasma sticker. And then I did. Then when I did Star Wars Resistance, that was not as many roles as many episodes, I should
Mhm.
say. But that, and then the other one, my friends were more excited than me because, as I said at the beginning of this interview, I was not a big sci-fi person. When I booked, and you're going to laugh first, and then I'll tell you the
Yeah.
Bene Gesserit ancestors, and I was laughing. I told a friend, "Yeah, I just booked this Bene Gesserit." He said, "Ellen, you moron! Bene Gesserit ancestors. Dune is the biggest franchise in the world other than
Yes.
Star Wars. So, honey, you did it." I would have to say from the reaction of my friends more than me, and then I started to realize how big Dune was to book a voiceover in that and work with the people who we won Oscars for the sound. I mean,
Mhm.
Theo Green is
Well,
astounding. I mean,
well,
the
Dune,
sound
you're
of
right.
Dune,
You're right. Dune is
it's huge. It's bloody huge.
it's huge. It's like, and people like, and in some ways, it's like you think of how many books alone. Now, I'm not talking about series and everything else.
Yeah.
Just Frank Herbert's original series. How it was, there is so many books to that and alone, and then the characters and the development of that. It's like Dune is an amazing franchise. I'm always partial to
It's
Star Wars, but I mean,
it's
one of the first reading. My gateway. I think outside of Star Wars, watching the movie and the science fiction was Tolkien. And
oh
still, I mean, it's fantasy, but it's very so similar. And it was Tolkien and Frank Herbert. I mean, dude was like, I remember my best friend, his mom loved Dune. I'd never heard of it. And she's like, here, read this book. And I was the guy that
oh
was like a reader. And she would keep handing me the books. And I was like, oh my God, this is such a cool story.
yeah.
The universe is this incredible universe with all these
Oh, out there.
trade houses
Yes,
and like, it's kind of,
Arachnis and just strange.
yeah, it's
But
just
I
so much. It's
remember
cool names of the
when I couldn't.
planets.
It's just so. Honestly, I know we're using this word a lot today. Iconic and so in the vernacular. It's like one of the biggest sci-fi franchises. I mean, I had no clue. I mean, it's like I said, I wasn't following sci-fi, and when I did the audition, I always run by a friend of mine auditions. He went,
Mhm.
I know this is untitled and it says secret, but Ellen, I think you're auditioning for Dune. I went, oh, that's good. That's good. I said, oh, yeah, that's that Frank Herbert book. He says, Ellen, you idiot. Again, this is, you booked this. I said, okay. And then I forgot about it. And then when I booked it, I went, yeah, because then I started to look at
No,
what this was.
absolutely.
Yeah,
The
holy moly.
and I think it's you know what I think Dune was before its time too. I think
Yes,
it was one of
100%.
those things. I think when in the 70s and 80s, when Dune was really cranking out, and it just wasn't there. The sci-fi market. I mean, even really looked prior to Star Wars and Alien.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, Alien.
those two movies, it's like that. It was the first sci-fi horror movie. This mixing that genre. And you have these two that really create the universe, and it's like that opening scene in Alien. It's like the ship's coming on, and the little woodpecker, and the computer's booting
Oh,
up. You've
good.
edited the coffee cups there, and you're like, this is a used universe that's in there. And you watch these movies, but like Dune was this almost fairy tale in
Hmm.
space, and it was a little slower. It wasn't action packed as much as You've got a lot of. I remember one of my friends go, "This kind of reads like the Old Testament," and I'm like, I
Interesting.
could see that because there's a
Yeah,
lot of history. It tells a lot of history.
there is a
If you read
biblical
about the
theme
history of
to
the
it.
trade houses, yes, it's very cerebral. See, I loved it. I covered the world of Tolkien. So when
You would
this
love it
was
then. Yeah.
sorcery, and then like this is space version of Tolkien almost. And dude, got all
That's
legends
actually
and
a
wars,
really good analogy. It is. I agree.
and and I think that's what. So but I think it just didn't hit people. And, when you had the people that really were loyal fans, and again, sizable market. Don't get me wrong, but I
Yeah.
think that you think about, God, when was the new release of the last Doom movie? Is it 20? It's like 22, 23. It was, it just came out not too long ago. Time post COVID. Time
2021.
post COVID, I can't tell you time anymore.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know why.
know. It's a
It
big
feels like
time,
it's,
right?
I go and it's like, it feels like it's been longer than it was, but it's like, yeah, it's probably at 21. The hit of that movie and how it impacted, it was just brilliant. And it was, a great, and then you look at some of even the television, adaptation.
2021. 2021. I
Yeah.
just looked it up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then like the Children of Dune and things like that are more
Oh,
adaptations, and it's just they're hitting the audiences now, and they're ready for it, and it's like, and they go like, oh, this is a new thing. I don't know how many kids are like, oh, this is really new, and I go, no, not really.
they've discovered it for the first time, right?
There's time, and it's like something new. It's like they look at you like you're crazy. And I'm like, oh, this has been around since the '70s. It's like literally 50 years old, and you're like, oh my god, and they're like looking at
Don't,
you.
don't don't tell anybody, okay?
No, I don't want to, because that ages me way too much.
Yeah, it's great.
But
In
no,
answer to your question, I have to say that's been very highlighty, if that's a word. Those are some major highlights for me.
no, and I think they're really unique. And it's like, and you just coming out of, like, right now, you are coming out of doing, like, just Megan was now on streaming. You did the voice. That I did not know you did that voice on that. I watched the movie and I was looking through and I go, you did the, the home, like, what's the name of the character? Oh my God. It's the Siri of the house. I can't think of
Yeah. Oh boy, did we say some stuff. I mean, I
oh
finally
my
watched the movie, but there was some stuff I wish they would have kept in that came out of my mouth. Oh God, it was fun to work with him and his producer. And I actually recorded that in my apartment in Toronto. Megan
God.
with Dune was also in my own apartment and won an Oscar for Best Sound. So if I audition for something, they go, "Oh, your sound isn't so good," I'll go, "The sound won an Oscar." If for Dune, I mean, not me,
That's
but I'm like, really? Because I remember there was a kind of a lower budget video game. They go, I'm not sure about the sound in your apartment. I go, well, Dune was fine with it. Megan was fine with it. But it was
it's all good.
very good. Now, Megan was
No.
last. I mean, I had
Oh, I
some.
had to be. I mean, and I look at it and I'm like, okay, is this going to be, but the amount of talent in that movie was amazing.
I mean,
It was
I had no clue
creepy.
what that movie was going to be. I was just told that it could be that the home AI, they had me do it very, very nice mellifluous, and then they had me do some real wacky ones and some mega X-rated stuff that came,
Oh,
and I don't know, part two, I know people haven't seen it, but I'm not sure where it's going to go yet. I can't say, but it's it's very cool movie. It's really,
no,
really
it
movie.
was great because, I kind of looked at it when I was going to watch it. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, that's what I did.
it's kind of like, is this like, and please don't take offense, but it's like my
Bride of
initial thought
Chucky.
was Chucky,
That's what I just said. Bride
I
of
Chucky,
Chucky.
and I'm like, okay. And then I watched it, and the scene
Very
where they're
clever.
bonding, Megan is bonding with a kid,
It's
and you're
brilliant.
like going like, oh my God, this is so creepy.
It was great. I thought it was very well done.
Oh, it was well done. It was, because I really didn't expect that I would go like, okay, this is a one watch, and I'm gonna like do other things, where you got things playing on
Yes.
the background,
Yeah.
and I'll watch the highlights of it. And I totally sucked into it and just sit there and watched it, and I'm like to the bitter end, and I'm like, this is a roller coaster ride, and it's and they and they got the all of the voices
That girl was
and
brilliant. That girl was
oh,
brilliant.
the little girl was amazing, you
Amazing.
know and that that's so hard as a child actor. I mean, like, to put that in, and it was the little girl was just
Yeah,
phenomenal.
she's fabulous. And actually, the woman who cast me, Sue Boyajian, thank you, Sue Boyajian, she cast the girl. The girl was originally a student of hers. So this was one of her first things. So she was brilliant. She talk about creepy. That girl eerie,
Yeah.
creepy me out. Yeah, it was a very good movie. I'm
No,
happy to be a
that's
part of that. Yeah.
well. I was looking down at our time, and I'm going to say I'm going to turn you back over to enjoying your time and everything. But it's been such a pleasure speaking with you,
It
Ellen.
went so quickly, and we'll have to do a
I
part two.
know
There's so much to
we
talk about.
definitely do. I mean, I definitely would like. We've got there's so much we haven't talked on. I was like,
I know.
notes, and I haven't even touched half of the notes. I had like these little post-its here. I was like, if I always over plan.
That's
Because I
okay.
always
Over planning is
and,
okay.
and I'm like over planned like questions because you don't want that eerie silence because and it's such a pleasure because you're like a natural speaker and you just go. I think the worst thing I did one time I was interviewing someone and it was like I prepared like 20 questions and I thought and I only need 10 and it's like they answered yes
Yes.
and no.
No.
Yes, there's no debate. And I go, so how, what was your thought on this? Oh, I just wanted to do something cool. And like you're going, well, I've just ate up 20 questions and we have 40 minutes left. I'm going to start juggling,
I've
start
been that
juggling.
way on the other end, Bill, where there's the question person is like, okay, what you want? Okay, I'll just talk and just.
That's bad. That's equally as bad as when you're asking, like you hijack the interview.
And you don't want to do that because you want to be give and take. But no, there's been a few, but you asked some good questions, so it was easy. This is
I
fun.
appreciate that. It was seriously a lot of fun, and we definitely need to schedule a part two.
We
I look
will.
forward
We
to
will.
that. And you have a great evening, and I appreciate you doing this later in the evening because I know scheduling was kind of crazy, but
I
this is a good
know,
night for
but you know
you.
what?
And
We got it together, and the late evening worked out perfectly for both of us, and so that's the main thing. So no worries, and I appreciate you asking me to do this interview with you. I had a blast, really. I can't believe it's almost an hour and 40
yeah,
minutes. There you
I know we've been going, so we're on it. Well, and we picked the same background. We were obviously twinsies now, so we've got this all worked.
go. You take care and have a great
You
night.
too.
Thank you
Good
again.
night, Ellen.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.